It's the things we love most that destroy us.
Hi, hello, how are y'all doing? My name is Suchi Flickerman, and welcome to my channel, where I talk about the stories that I love and that inspire me. Although maybe that description isn't the most accurate for today's video, I'm not sure how much inspiration I got from this bad boy. In fact, the only inspiration he gave was for me to not be like him, you know? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was directed by Francis Lawrence. It is an adaptation of the 2020 novel of the same name by one Miss Suzanne Collins. This is a prequel and is set 64 years before the events of the first Hunger Games book. I'm not exactly what you would call a Hunger Games girly. I read the original trilogy when I was like 14 and never read them again. And then I watched the first two movies when they came out in theaters, and then never watched those again either. And I also didn't watch Mockingjay Part 1 or 2 at all. It's not even like I didn't enjoy the books. I actually thought they were pretty good at the time. The whole thing just fell off my radar. I don't know. Which means that when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes book came out in 2020, I also didn't read it. So I might not be a real fan, but also I loved Everlark back in the day. And I was in those trenches reading the unrecorded hours back when fanfiction.net was in its prime, okay? Back when I was probably definitely too young to be reading it. For those of you who aren't in the know, the Unrecorded Hours is probably the most famous Everlark fanfic out there to this day. So much so that if you start Googling the title, that fic is the very first thing that pops up. Like, that's how famous it is. It's also up on AO3 now. Anyway, I saw the trailer for Songbirds and Snakes, and it had a whole bunch of really cool looking scenes, and I thought, maybe it's time. It's time for me to dive back into this world in all its dystopian glory, because clearly the real world doesn't have enough of it. In this video, I'll be giving my review of the film and dive into some of the deeper themes of the story, and most importantly, why it's so culturally relevant in today's geopolitical landscape. Fair warning, there will be some piping hot takes today, ones that bring up the very real ramifications of the Hunger Games franchise as a whole. So if that bothers you, that's a you problem, because I'm always right. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes asks the important question: what if a hot teenage boy became a fascist dictator? What then? But Suchi, you don't understand. He's a hot teenage boy. Look at him. He's just a baby girl. I can fix him. Can you though? Because if Rachel Zegler, the queen herself, couldn't fix him, then what chance do any of us have? Because I'm a random person on the street. You're a random person on the street. We have no sway here. In fact, I'd argue that the point of this whole shebang is that there are some people you just can't fix, no matter how pretty their eyes are or how lush their hair is, okay? But more on that later. This film follows the early years of President Snow. You know, that psycho old man who terrorized literally everyone in the original Hunger Games. Yeah, that one. Except he wasn't always President Snow. When he was but a wee lad, he was known as Corio, short for Coriolanus Snow. The way my tongue just desperately wants to say Cornelius every single time. Like, even this man's name had to be a piece of work. Coriolanus Snow is played by one Tom Blythe. I haven't seen him in anything before this, but he ate this role up. He did. I will give flowers where they're due. The film opens with a scene where young Coriolanus and a girl are hiding in the post-war rubble, starving and freezing to death as they watch a man hack off the limbs of some dead corpse to eat. In the same scene, it's revealed that Corio's father, who was a general, was killed during a rebellion by the districts, and that all of his family's money is gone with the wind. This scene was an interesting way to begin the film, as cannibalism tends to be, but it works here because it sets the lens through which Corio is going to view his family's situation and the world as he gets older. The girl Corio is with is his cousin Tigress, Yes, the very same tigress with the stripes and the weird body modifications we see in Mockingjay. Koryo and Tigress are raised by their grandmam, who is this fascist girly who sings the Capitol national anthem every morning and is crazy. She thinks that district people are poor dirtbags and that the Capitol is God's gift to humanity. I see where Koryo gets it from. Look, she may be psycho, but she does have bouts of lucidity every now and then, and she can be weirdly perceptive. We'll come back to that later. Tigress, on the other hand, is not a fascist girly. She's a fashion girly. An important distinction in this scenario. Tigress is very much a soft-hearted character who, unlike Grandmam, doesn't immediately assume that all non-capital people are trash. Dare I say she sees them as human? Hunter Schafer slays here. She does a fantastic job of portraying Tigress and her compassionate nature throughout the film. And it's the dichotomy of her character versus Grandmam's that creates this very interesting familial dynamic for Koryo. Almost like they mirror himself. Because we do see two sides to Koryo in this film, it's very obvious which side wins out in the end, but let's get into it. One aspect of his character is that he thinks he deserves the world, and that he's entitled to it because his family was once rich and powerful, but apparently not anymore. Because as of the beginning of the film, he's poor. He and Grandmam and Tigress are living in a penthouse, but it's a crumbling penthouse, okay? It's different. Another important distinction. It's the size of a mansion, but also they're barely able to keep the lights on because they have no money. We only ever see Koryo eating when he's at school, so food is also a scarcity for them. And it's Koryo's senior year. In order for him to be able to afford to go to university, he needs to excel in school and win the Plinth Prize. The Plinths are a disgustingly rich family from District 2 who made their money during the war manufacturing weapons. The capital accepted the Plinths even though their district, presumably because they have bucket loads of cash and made some very large donations. So the Plinth Prize is awarded by the family to the top performer of the Capital Academy so that he or she can attend university on full scholarship. The Plinths have a son, Sejanus, played by Josh Andre Rivera, I believe, who is in the same grade as Koryo, and they're kind of besties. At least Sejanus thinks so. Koryo kind of just tolerates him like a disgruntled cat. The other capital kids are your typical rich dystopian gossip girl coded characters. We have Clemencia, or Clemmy for short, will sell state secrets for a shred of recognition. We have my personal favorite, Arachne Crane. Very stuck up, very snooty rich girl type. If her name reminds you of a violently poisonous spider, you aren't alone. In the original trilogy, I believe there was a Seneca Crane. You know, the guy with the funky beard. That one. They're probably related, although I don't think Arachne is his direct ancestor because of what happens later on in this film. So all of the capital kiddies are gathered at school because they're going to announce who's going to win the Plinth Prize. Except no, just kidding, they aren't. Enter Dean Highbottom, played by the illustrious Peter Dinklage. This man is just having the time of his life playing this character. It's so much fun to watch. Dean Highbottom breaks the bad news to the kiddies, all while chugging down vials of Morphling to numb his crushing guilt over having invented the games. Yeah, he did that, and he regrets it so much that he looks like he would rather be literally anywhere else in every single scene he's in. It's awesome. We are told that the capital is losing its sway over the people, that the Hunger Games, which have been going on for the past 9 years, are no longer entertaining. So as a fun learning exercise, the top 24 Academy students will be mentoring the tributes for the upcoming 10th annual Hunger Games. And it's the student whose tribute ends up putting on the best show and not necessarily surviving the games wins the Plinth Prize. Because having top grades just doesn't cut it anymore. Now you have the added bonus of making sure your assigned mentee is entertaining while they're forced to participate in the child death match. Naturally, everyone is upset at this little wrinkle. Funnily enough, though, most of these capital kids are just mad that they have to be like in the same room as these district kids. Like, that's the biggest inconvenience of their lives. Although choreo actually does need the money too, so there's that little extra layer of fun. So the Capitol kids are made to watch the reaping ceremonies for each district, and each of the 24 top students is assigned to one of the tributes. We finally get to the District 12 reaping, and there she is, Rachel Zegler in the flesh as Lucy Gray Baird. I don't really get the hate that Rachel Zegler has received. Like, I've seen her Snow White interview, and I had no opinion on it. Honestly, Snow White is not a thing that takes up space in my mind, so I just didn't care. I think the criticism, if any, should be directed towards the people writing Snow White to be that way, maybe? Because it's not in Rachel's hands. Like, she just works there, you know? Blame Bob Iger. When in doubt, always blame the CEO. Lucy Gray was selected because the mayor's daughter has a grudge against her for daring to be the ex-girlfriend of her current boyfriend, Billy Tope. No greater crime was ever committed than being the ex-girlfriend of some unwashed rando. Lucy Gray is, of course, selected, and as she walks up to the podium, she slips a live snake down the back of the mayor's daughter who sent her to the child death games. No notes there. We simply must stand. The guards pretty brutally knock her down on the stage for that little display, but she absolutely owns that moment too. Lucy Gray Baird, as her last name suggests, is a bard. She's a part of a traveling musical group called the Covey, who are basically like her found family, and it was just her rotten luck that they happened to be in District 12 during the reaping ceremony, and also that she knew Billy Tope. So Lucy Gray was just struck down by a peacekeeper, but the Covey starts singing, you know, just to lighten the mood a little. And then Lucy Gray gets up, belts out the absolute banger, "Nothing You Can Take From Me Is Ever Worth Keeping," and then tells everyone watching to kiss her ass. Iconic. And then she does the most sarcastic finishing bow the world has ever seen before being taken away by the peacekeepers. Meanwhile, everyone's cheering for her. Like, they don't seriously think she's gonna come back from this, but they're just like, yeah, too bad. Her song was a bop though. Gonna miss her. By the way, all of this is being televised live to the Capitol. So this is how Choreo first lays eyes on his tribute, Lucy Gray. After all the students are assigned as mentors, Dean Highbottom catches Choreo alone and just absolutely cuts him down to size, even though Choreo towers over Dean. He comments on Corey's makeshift shirt and too tight shoes. Basically, this man despises Choreo because he'd been besties with his father, who basically stole his idea for the Hunger Games and made it what it is today. Speaking of Choreo's makeshift shirt, let's talk about the fashion in this movie for a hot minute, okay? Clothing can really carry a lot of the cinematography of a film. Fashion is often used to convey meaning and deeper themes of a story without the characters having to outright say it in their dialogue. The shirt that Choreo is wearing in this scene was made by Tigress that morning, and she used the tiles from the bathroom of their crumbling penthouse to make the buttons. Very metal of her, actually. And okay, I will concede, Snow looks damn good in that outfit. He wears that shirt. His blonde curls are curling. That shirt is doing its thing of clinging perfectly to those broad shoulders of his. I get it. I do. But also he's like twisted in the head, as we'll see later on. This film brings up an interesting point on the perils of associating good looks with being a good person, because pretty privilege is a thing that exists. I know some people were complaining that he's too good looking in this film, but again, that's kind of the point. There are shitty people in the world who get away with their crimes simply because they fit certain beauty standards, or if they're rich. If you are a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed young man, you're a cherub, actually. You can do no wrong, even if you have no conscience. Going back to the fashion, there's also these scarlet uniforms that the Academy students wear. I think these look really unique, really cool. Normally, I'm not a huge fan of skirt and pant combinations, but the lines here are really sharp, and that pleating on the fabric, immaculate. The film's costume designer, Trish Somerville, said that she wanted the Academy students in those red uniforms to look like a veining of blood flow, because these kids are the blood and the future of the Capitol. And that checks out, but also it's just a physical reminder to me that Choreo Snow is a walking red flag. He is. Tigress serves some really good looks as well. She eventually becomes one of the main influencers of modern capital fashion as we know and love it, and I like that we can see the beginnings of that in her style here. I like that she's always dressed in soft pinks and dusty rose tones, again just kind of highlighting her character as gentle and empathetic and kind, whereas the rest of her family are stuck-up psychos. I want to talk about Lucy Gray's style for a second. We have her iconic rainbow dress, which belonged to her mother and most notably has Katniss flowers painted on the bodice. That's gonna come in later. I like that this dress looks very lived in, like the skirt ruffles look a bit faded and it has this kind of homemade quality to it. Rachel Zegler once said in an interview that Lucy Gray is a performer who was forced to fight, while Katniss is a fighter forced to perform. That was very galaxy brained of her because every single word of that is true. We can see from all of Lucy Gray's outfits that she's into clothes. She wears makeup, she likes colorful flowers and pretty things. She's a very feminine protagonist in a way that Katniss isn't. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. Like, Katniss is very much a tomboyish, not like other girls, girly, and that made sense for her character because she's literally just trying to survive one horrific event after another at all times. She just didn't have the energy to care about looking pretty until she was forced to. I respect that. I do. I like that Lucy Gray's whole aesthetic is just sunshine cottagecore, very pastel, love shack fancy coded. I love that the clothing we see her wear in the film translates the idea that you can just be a girly girl and also be strong in a story like this. Like, both can be true. There's a few cool Easter eggs with the clothing that some of the tributes wear as well. We have Coral here, who is the final girl boss of all the tributes and wields a trident. She can do very cool things with a trident. She will kill you. She won't hesitate. Slay Queen. Coral is from District 4, where the main industry is fishing. And indeed, we can see little fishes embroidered on her tunic. Very cool, very fun little detail. We also have Reaper, who is from District 11, where the main thing is agriculture. And we see on his shirt what looks like wheat and some flowers. By the way, this actor absolutely kills his big scene later on. Like, that's some imagery I won't be getting out of my head for a long time. And now we have what is probably the best character design of the entire film. The delightfully deranged Dr. Volumnia Gall. Viola Davis acting her ass off here, and she's having the most fun doing it. Dr. Volumnia Gall is the head game maker for the Hunger Games and spends most of her days holed up in her lab, making the most unhinged devil spawn creatures you've ever seen. She experiments with creating freakish mutations of animals to create a whole new layer of terror to the games. Because the child's death sprees just aren't enough anymore, now we want to throw in some cute little poisonous rainbow snakes in there to make things even more fun and dandy. Dr. Gall's whole thing is deriving perverse pleasure from other people's pain, so her style has to be equally off the rails, and it is. She has a single blue eye that pierces into your soul, and the way her hair is just giving evil Albert Einstein, absolutely bonkers mad scientist with that classic gray streak running through it. I love her lab coat. The way it transitions from a deep red at the top to white at the bottom, making it look like it's just been drenched in the blood of her enemies. Even her gloves, which are this kind of glossy latex material, also a vivid red, and combined with that glossy exterior, they almost just look wet with blood. Like she's just been feasting on raw hearts Game of Thrones style. Very over the top, very cool. That's how you make a mad scientist look quirky and fun, but also absolutely terrifying without her having to say a single word. So it's very clear that immense care was taken in the fashion aspect of this film to make it a part of the cinematography. And that's pretty awesome. I think aesthetics and what people wear in film can be a really great way to tell a story too. So going back to the plot, Corio goes to the train station where the tributes are arriving to introduce himself to Lucy Gray as her mentor. The tributes have been shipped to the capital in cattle cars, by the way. They've gone several days without food or water. feeding the tributes lavish dinners, treating them fancily. None of these are a thing in the early years. Like, these are very much the Hunger Games. Lucy Gray jumps out of the cattle car and Snow gives her a white rose and tells her that he's her mentor. He's perfectly gentlemanly here, and she's all smiles and goes, well, my mama used to bathe me in milk and rose petals. This whole scene is very much a meet cute in the worst possible circumstances. The tributes are then literally dumped via a dump truck into a human zoo enclosure where local passersby can just gawk at them through the monkey bars. Koryo was also in the enclosure because he just wanted to come along for the ride, you know? See where the day takes him. I think this is his first taste of what it's like to be the other, like how it feels to be a lowly district peasant instead of a spoiled capital kid who lives in a penthouse. Of course, there are also cameras outside the bars to really complete the human zoo experience. So he literally starts to have a panic attack because of this, and Lucy Gray has to tell him to like calm down. She takes him aside and just goes, own it, just own it. We are introduced to Lucretius Lucky Flickerman, local weatherman and amateur magician. Iconic combo if you ask me. Lucy Gray ends up charming the audience completely when Lucky Flickerman interviews her through the monkey bars, and she just does this by being her best, most authentic self, which is a cheerful ray of sunshine. She is so much stronger than me because I would be sobbing in a corner after not eating for 3 days. Like, I would not be my best self in that moment. Really goes to show that resilience can show through in different ways. You don't have to be a stoic, emotionless shell of a person to demonstrate that you aren't easy to break. I like that Lucy Gray has to tell Snow to get her some food. Like, that thought just doesn't occur to him naturally. Even though she and all the other tributes are being held in an open-air prison with no access to food or water or any basic necessities. I'll come back to that symbolism later. Koryo is clearly taken by Lucy Gray. He sees that she's a girl, but not that she's a person, if that makes sense. There's a scene later where Koryo tells his family of this new hiccup in his plan of snagging the plinth prize, and it's Tigress who says that he should show Lucy Gray that he cares about her if he wants her to win. It's Tigress who tells Koryo to show Lucy Gray a shred of empathy, because asking him to treat her like a human being is probably asking for too much there. My girl Tigress was being strategic, and this is when it clicks for Snow. He realizes that Lucy Gray is clearly able to capture an audience with her singing and her shining personality, and that's how she's going to entertain the people. He just has to keep her alive long enough for her to outlive all of the other tributes during the games, and then he can win the plinth prize. Yes! Koryo was kind of forced to explain this idea of his in class the next day to Dr. Gall, like the fact that to make the audiences care about the games, they have to care about the tributes as people. They have to interview the tributes and show the audience that they're humans just like us capital folk. Make it truly reality TV, and that's what's going to get people to watch the games. Does Koryo really care about the tributes as people? Probably not, but he does care about winning that prize money. Dr. Gall just goes, interesting, and then tells him to write a proposal on it and submit it the next day. Meanwhile, Clemencia, remember her? She's like, count me in too. Koryo and I do every assignment together. Also, Sejanus, Koryo's unintentional bestie, absolutely in the throes of survivor's guilt here. He thinks that the Hunger Games are a bad thing, actually. They're kind of unethical, actually. He's the only one in the capital, other than Tigress, with a conscience, and he's torn apart over having to mentor his tribute. I believe his name is Marcus, who was his classmate back when he lived in District 2, which is very messed up. You're mentoring the kid you grew up with, who will probably be slaughtered in the child death arena. I'd be losing my mind too. Koryo brings some food to to Lucy Gray. And because Lucy Gray has a conscience, she shares the sandwich that he brought her with him. The war must have been hard for you too. Like, that's how big of a heart Lucy Gray has. It's ultimately wasted on this man, but it is what it is. By the way, Capital Regina George Arachne Crane is stabbed by her tribute here because she was taunting her with food through the monkey bars like she would an animal. Hence why I don't think Seneca Crane here is her direct descendant. The other capital girlie that's killed is our Clemencia, our Clemmy. Basically, she tags along with Koryo, who wrote and submitted the paper all by himself. She tags along with Koryo when he's summoned by Dr. Gall, and she straight up goes, I wrote it. I thought of the entire thing and I wrote it all last night. Just throws Choreo under the bus. Dr. Gall just goes full mustache twirling villain mode and says, well, the paper that you obviously wrote is at the bottom of this giant tank of poisonous rainbow snakes. Stick your hand in the tank and retrieve the paper that you wrote. The snakes shouldn't harm you because they're used to your scent from the paper that you wrote. So of course the snakes bite Clemmy and she dies. Choreo's just watching the whole thing and goes, is she gonna live? And Dr. Gall's just like, maybe. I decay. These snakes are a new invention. If she dies, we'll just say it was the flu. After they drag Clemmy's body away, very sad, Dr. Gall turns to Snow and just goes, I like your proposal. We're gonna use it. Now run along. It's time for my milk and crackers. Incredible line delivery there. Very Willy Wonka of her in the most nightmarish way possible. The next day, the tributes and their mentors are taken on a tour of the arena, which is just like a rudimentary coliseum with some rocks and some tunnels underneath. One thing I will say about the set design and the cinematography here is that everything looks very real. I think they built a lot of the sets from scratch and also filmed on location for many of the scenes. Like, you can just tell that relatively little CGI was used in favor of more practical effects, and that makes every action scene look very believable, which is a nice touch. Really helps sell the more analog, back-in-time aesthetic of this film. So it turns out that some rebels planted some bombs in the arena, which all explode while everyone's touring the place. Choreo is trapped beneath a beam, a flaming beam, and instead of running away and escaping, Lucy Gray pushes the flaming beam off Choreo and saves his life. It's all very dramatic, very theatrical. The flames are licking up the screen in slow motion the whole time. Choreo is injured and wakes up later in the hospital, surrounded by Tigers and Sejanus, two people who care about him, whom he eventually betrays. He is the snake that bites the hand that feeds him, but for now the old-timey TV in front of him is playing a live broadcast of lucky flickermen interviewing the tributes and showcasing their personalities the night before the games begin. Yes, even after the bombing, the games are continuing. The child murder show must go on. Lucy Gray sings this beautiful song alluding to her ex and his role in sending her to the Hunger Games, and this has everyone in their feelings by the end of it. Choreo watches this whole thing with this intense focus and is just like, this girl just saved my life. Are we a couple? Is she my girl now? Is she mine? Like one of those seagulls from Finding Nemo. Mine? Lucy Gray's singing captures the hearts of the Capitol, and she gains thousands of sponsors in one single night, so she's really popular. Before the games begin, Choreo sneaks back to the human zoo where the tributes are being held, and gives Lucy Gray his mother's powder compact, which he filled with rat poison. And to his credit, he does try to soothe her fears, and tells her that he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that she not only wins, but that she survives. This is an interesting turn for him, because up until this point, his only concern was winning the Plinth Prize by making sure his tribute was the most entertaining. But after Lucy Gray saves his ass, clearly his priorities have shifted a little, because Lucy Gray is his girl now. The games begin, hosted by none other than our favorite, Lucretius Lucky Flickerman. One thing I appreciated about this film is that they don't sugarcoat the fact that these are children. These are children that are being held at gunpoint to kill each other. This aspect is kind of glossed over in the main Hunger Games films, but not here. These kids don't receive any formal training beforehand like they do in Katniss's time. They're starved, and a lot of them are heartbreakingly young, and a few of them are very sick. Very, very fun stuff here, y'all. Lucy Gray spends most of the games hiding in the tunnels with a boy tribute from District 12 because she's a singer, not a fighter, and all she's armed with is the rat poison that Choreo gave her. Choreo does his best to help her from afar while he watches her on those analog 60s television sets, including sending her water on these fabulously malfunctioning drones, which have all the accuracy of a blindfolded person shooting arrows in the middle of the night. Sejanus' tribute Marcus had run away during the rebel bombing, but was caught and basically is crucified alive and displayed over the arena as a warning to the rebels, and he's mercy killed by one of the tributes in a very, very sad, it was a very sad scene. Again, this film just further highlighting the horrific events that these children are forced to go through because of fascism. I also love that Lucky Flickerman has to cancel his pre-fixed dinner reservation that night because the child death games are going longer than planned. Truly the world's biggest inconvenience. Also, the dinner reservation was for 2 people and a high chair, presumably for baby Caesar Flickerman. Lucretius is his daddy. Theory confirmed. Sejanus sneaks into the arena that night to give Marcus a proper District 2 burial by spreading breadcrumbs over his body. And Dr. Gall basically tells Corio to get him out of there before anyone notices. Sejanus is like, I want to die. And Corio's like, you are going to be the reason I die. So we gotta get out of here before the tributes realize we're here and try to murder us. Of course, that's what ends up happening. But Corio and Sejanus manage to escape. Sejanus fully in self-sabotage mode, by the way. Corio keeps saying things like, you're rich. You can help these people without getting yourself mauled to death by armed, starving children. You have money, so use it to quietly make a difference. Which, fair, he makes some good points. Unfortunately for Sejanus, he is not smart. We love him, he has a conscience, but he's not at all clever about concealing it. Also, while they're escaping the arena, Corio ends up bludgeoning one of the tributes to death. Baby's first murder. It wasn't self-defense, but still. The games continue. Lucy Gray's rat poison unintentionally kills Dill, one of the younger tributes who was sick with tuberculosis. Remember Reaper? This guy? This is his big moment. Probably the most powerful scene to come from this entire film. He's devastated because he spent most of the games trying to protect Dill, and when he sees her die, something in him just snaps. He starts gathering all of the dead tributes in the arena, including Dill, and rips down the Capitol flag and just covers their bodies with it, just to give them some semblance of a proper burial. And then he just shouts to the cameras, to the people watching, how are you gonna punish me now? Because the Capitol has already done the most damage possible. There's nothing left for the Capitol to take. Just an incredible, heart-wrenching scene. The Capitol flag rippling behind him in slow motion, the way the music dies down so that there's nothing to distract you from the fact that the end result of these games is just a bunch of dead children, and it's all at the hands of the Capitol. Give Dimitri Abold his Oscar. Moving on, more stuff happens, but the gist is that Dr. Gall is displeased that the rebels are making a mockery of her games, so she says she'll unleash a rainbow of destruction upon the tributes in revenge, and declares that there will be no tribute left alive. Corio rightly assumes that she means to let her poisonous rainbow snakes loose in the arena, so he once again cheats to make sure that Lucy Gray stays alive by sneaking a handkerchief with Lucy Gray scent on it into the snake tank. The snakes are unleashed in the arena and they basically kill all of the tributes, except of course Lucy Gray. And because of the handkerchief that Corio slipped on in there, the snakes are used to her scent and don't attack her. But no one except Corio knows this, so we get this really cool scene of the snakes sort of just slowly engulfing Lucy Gray while she sits there and sings, terrified out of her wits. But she's just standing there like belting this song out as the last tribute standing. Everyone's like, why aren't the snakes biting her? And Snow just goes, it must be the singing. It's calming them down. Yeah, it's definitely not because I cheated or anything. Corio demands that Dr. Gall call off her snakes and let Lucy Gray live. Because Lucy Gray's singing has swayed the Capitol's hearts, everyone else in the room starts demanding that she live also. So Dr. Gall is forced to concede because the Capitol always gets what it wants. And in this case, it was for Lucy Gray to live. She's won! Yes! Corio gets the plinth prize and the girl. Bag secured, right? Right? Wrong, actually. Wrong. Dean Highbottom finds the handkerchief and the powder compact full of rat poison, which has the Snow family crest or some initials on it. So Corio is caught for cheating and sent to serve as a peacekeeper in the district's for his crimes. So basically going from like rich DC politician in training to lowly police officer in like rural Kentucky. Bag fumbled, unfortunately. Also, RIP to those luscious curls. You were gone from us too soon. Corio hears that Lucy Gray was sent home after winning the games, so he manages to get assigned to District 12. And also, Sejanus is here for some reason. He just had to be there for his bestie through thick and thin, and I gotta respect that. So they both arrive in District 12 to serve as peacekeepers. Corio excels in all of his training because he's hot and talented, unfortunately. And one night they go to the Hob Bar, where a band is performing live, and one of them is Miss Lucy Gray Baird. So they reunite. It's very cute, very emotionally charged. They spend time with each other afterwards, and we have this big kiss scene in a sunlit meadow. It's very aesthetic, very cottagecore vibes. It's giving the calm before the inevitable storm. The third act of this film is very tonally different from the first two parts, so much so that it almost feels like a different movie altogether. The first two acts are super action-packed and high stakes because of the games and all the political intrigue, but all that kind of fizzles out in the last act. And it's not a bad thing necessarily, but it does feel a little jarring, and certain scenes definitely drag a little, but the Snowbeard moments are what saves this last act for me. I think the actors' chemistry is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here because there aren't too many Snowbeard scenes in this film. There isn't much time to develop their relationship, but since the tension is there, it still works. So we get some scenes of them being all cute and domestic. Choreo meets Lucy Gray's Covey family. They go swimming in lakes. She sings songs to him, including the hanging tree. It's all fun and games, not the Hunger Games though. We get this incredible scene where Lucy Gray is explaining what swamp potatoes are to Choreo and just goes, "Well, I think the name Katniss suits it much better." And there's just this very pointed shot on Coriolanus' face when she says that. Just imagine this man's face in 65 years' time when a girl named Katniss turns his life upside down while singing Lucy Gray's song. Imagine the sheer panic running through his veins in that moment. Throughout the third act, even though we see Choreo happy being with Lucy Gray, he's clearly not where he wants to be in life. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his days living the idyllic cottagecore life with Lucy Gray because he lives for drama. He does. He's not one for the quiet life. He wants to be king of the world with Lucy Gray at his side because it's what he deserves. And it's his desire to control everything on God's green earth that turns him against the people who cared for him the most. And this is where he starts to slip into that dark abyss of evil, never to come out of it again. Sejanus has been plotting with the rebels to escape to Canada or whatever to start a new life outside of Panem, and Choreo confronts him about it, records the conversation on a Jabberjay bird, and sends the recording to Dr. Gall in the capital. Choreo also shoots and kills the mayor's daughter, who caught them with Sejanus and the other rebels. I'm not really going to get into it. This part was a little convoluted and probably worked better in the book because we would have had his inner monologue on all this, but basically Choreo is willing to kill anyone who gets in his way of returning to the capital and regaining everything he's lost. And that includes his bestie Sejanus because Dr. Gall received his little recording and Sejanus is hanged for treason. This man joined the peacekeepers for you and you sent him to his grave. You had your best friend killed. Just villain things, I guess. But he's hot, so it's okay, am I right? And Snow is really upset that his bestie is dead. He has a complete breakdown. He's sobbing, he's devastated, even though it's his fault. Emotions are weird, huh? But the thing that makes him snap completely is Lucy Gray betraying him before he can do the same to her, because she saw Sejanus be hanged and correctly guessed that it was Snow's doing. He broke Sejanus' trust, and he will very likely break hers too. Snow and Lucy Gray plan to escape District 12 because the peacekeepers are looking for the person who killed the mayor's daughter, and the mayor thinks that it's Lucy Gray who did it. But it wasn't. It was Snow. Who would have guessed? Why is that? Why do you have to be like this? And we get this beautiful rendition of the hanging tree playing in the background as they cross the countryside. It's the Rachel Zegler one, but this cinematic version of it. And it bothers me so much that it's not on any of the official soundtracks because it is the best version. Put it on there. We get the iconic forest scene where Snow's like, "I'm glad to be running away with you, Lucy Gray. I've had enough of killing, actually. I've killed 3 people, and that's enough for me." And Lucy Gray just goes, Who's the third? There was that tribute bludgeon in the arena. There was the mayor's daughter. Who's the third? Who is it? Snow's panicking, trying to cover his ass. "It was my old self. I killed my old self." And Lucy Gray's like, sure, yeah. He killed Sejanus, I'm gonna get out of here before he kills me too. Which, fair. Lucy Gray tells Snow she's just going to go out and collect some Katniss. She'll be back in a few minutes. And then just vanishes forever. Queen shit. Girly really said I would rather disappear into the void than be with, what is it? Cunty Draco Malfoy who discovers fascism. I mean, it's accurate. Because she decided she couldn't fix him, actually. For that we must stand. One interesting tidbit about Lucy Gray in this film is that she's clearly very observant and socially aware. She's charming because she can sing, yes, but also because she can read people. Lucy Gray is a character that's seen much more of the world than Corio has. She's traveled around, she's met many people from all walks of life, and according to one of her songs, spread her kisses like honey. Earlier in the film, Grandmam makes a curious comment about Lucy Gray. She sees her on the TV screen and goes, "That one hasn't been a girl in a long time." Again, strangely insightful observation from an old woman who's otherwise lost her marbles. What does Grandmam mean by that? Does it mean what we think she means? Well, like much of Lucy Gray's character, I think that's open to interpretation. What is clear is that Lucy Gray was forced to grow up quickly, as most district kids are, and that she had to learn to charm and entertain people as a survival mechanism. She had to learn to see people for what they are, and she saw Snow for the absolute menace to society that he is. So Lucy Gray disappears into thin air. Snow loses his mind. He hears her singing in the distance, but she's nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, all the Jabberjays are all echoing the song back to him, just repeatedly over and over. Very creepy, very haunting. He really starts going insane here and starts shooting everywhere around him. There's a brief moment where it looks like he shot Lucy Gray, but when he goes to find her, all he sees is a trail of footprints that goes cold at the edge of the forest. Like the Lucy Gray poem by William Wordsworth, this Lucy Gray disappears into the wilderness, never to be seen again. She'll always be that missing piece for Snow, that wild thing that he could never quite tame and bring under his control. And that's what's going to haunt him for the rest of his days. I personally think she survived, even if Snow did shoot her. I choose to believe that she ended up running away to Canada or whatever is north of Panem. She became one of those witchy women in Studio Ghibli films who live alone in the forest and make weird art. Or maybe she's not alone. Maybe she found a new covey and a man who isn't a snake, but a songbird like her. Snow returns to the capital, takes a leaf out of Olenna Tyrell's book, and poisons Dean Highbottom for sending him to the districts, and also because he just doesn't like him. Then he's basically adopted by the Plinths. They don't know he had their son killed. He conveniently left that part out. And they give him the money for university, and his family's fortune is restored. But our favorite fashion girly, Tigress, sees him for what he's become. She sees right through him. He isn't the Corio she once knew. Now he's truly just as cold and unfeeling as Snow. He just goes, "How do I look in my fancy new suit?" And Tigress, just in the most dismayed tone ever, says, "You look like your father." I mean, what else do I say to that? If you disappoint a sweetheart like Tigress, you failed at life. You have. And Dr. Gall takes him under her wing for his undying loyalty to the capital, and that's the end of that. Snow lands on top, and unfortunately for literally everyone in Panem, he won't fall down for a long, long time. As far as villain origin stories go, aside from the slightly convoluted third act, this was pretty solid. And in no small part because every single actor in this movie was giving it their all, giving it the performance of a lifetime. If nothing else, this film is a shining example to everyone that some men are just lost causes, no matter how pretty they are. Alternatively, I do think it would have been cool if Lucy was confirmed to have survived and if she stayed in Panem. And who knows, maybe she even joins the rebellion. Maybe she infiltrates the Viper's Nest that is capital high society under a new alias, perhaps as a spy. Maybe Snow keeps catching glimpses of her at these fancy galas. Maybe she sees him too. And maybe she keeps on baiting him. Maybe they play the most twisted game of cat and mouse while their unresolved sexual tension is still simmering between the surface. And maybe they give in to their desire for a little bit. Maybe bad man forgets how to be bad, but only around her. And maybe they're sweet for a while, hidden from everyone else, but still they're ultimately on opposite sides of the war. Maybe even after all that, they are still doomed to fail. After all, a bird cannot take a snake for a mate. Oh well, I guess that's what AO3 is for. But let's be real. I was cooking for a second there. I was. Before I wrap this video up, I need to talk about something less fun. I need to talk about this film's director, Francis Lawrence. He, along with some other Hollywood celebrities, recently signed a letter to President Joe Biden in support of, well, another war in which innocent civilians, many of whom are children, are being indiscriminately bombed and starved in an open-air prison. Sound familiar? Well, you put it in your own movies, Francis. You did. The symbolism is right there. especially when you included scenes of the child tributes being held in the human zoos, which are open to the elements, while being denied access to food and water, while being treated worse than animals. Unfortunately, the war you are expressing support for is not some made-up dark fantasy like your movies, bro. It's a real thing, and real people are suffering because of it. I don't understand how you direct a scene like this, where the capital is framed as the bad guy for bombing civilian homes and hospitals, only to turn around in real life and go, the capital was right, actually. Like, how do you misunderstand your own work to this degree? And when you spent literal years making multiple films around this topic too, it's just interesting. We in the West and in the global North have a responsibility of recognizing who we are in this narrative, and that is that we are the capital. I wake up every day knowing that my tax dollars are funding apartheid and genocide, and it guts me inside. I am Sejanus. Actually, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. We, the West, are the capital. To pretend otherwise is dangerous and delusional. There's a time and a place to be delulu, and this ain't it. Hollywood loves being anti-war and anti-injustice, but only in fiction. It's only ever for the aesthetic. Because when it comes down to reality, Hollywood just goes, I do not see. I can't read suddenly. Because at the end of the day, atrocities are only labeled as such if they hurt the rich and the powerful. The rest of the world can burn for all they care. These are real people and real children whose lives are being uprooted and ended too soon. These are the Hunger Games of our world. And we, the West, have a choice to do the right thing for once. We can put an end to it. I'll be linking down below some ways that we can help make a difference. Oh my gosh. This was a long ass video. If you managed to watch through to the end here, I hope you got a snack in between or a fun little drink, maybe an iced latte. I hope you guys enjoyed this frankly unhinged review, and let me know your thoughts on the film down below. Or, you know, just anything else that's weighing on your mind, your hopes, your dreams, cookie recipes. Thank you all so much for watching, and please have a happy and safe holiday season. I'll see you all in the new year. Bye.